Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we are going to unpack the incredible action-packed history of England. Now, when we think of England today, we usually picture this powerful island nation that expanded outwards to conquer and colonize the globe, right? But what's truly fascinating is that this reputation as a global conqueror was actually forged by centuries of being conquered itself. From prehistoric migrations to just wave after wave of violent invasions, England is literally the ultimate melting pot of conquerors. And today, we're going to see exactly how all that chaos forged the modern nation.
Okay, let's dive right into this fast-paced chronological roadmap. We are covering over 2,000 years of dramatic upheavals in 6 parts, starting with the early Britons and the Romans, then the Anglo-Saxons and Vikings, the pivotal year of 1066, the tumultuous Middle Ages, the explosive Tudor and Stuart era, and finally, the journey from empire to modern Britain.
All right, let's start the clock right at the very beginning of human settlement with Section 1, Britons and Romans, the early invasions.
So, picture this. Our story begins before Britain was even an island. Around 11,000 years ago, as the last ice age ended, melting ice sheets completely flooded a low-lying land bridge known as Doggerland, and that permanently cut Britain off from continental Europe. But despite this isolation, some pretty incredible advancements arrived over the millennia. By 4000 BC, farming was introduced, and they built monumental stone circles like Stonehenge. For centuries, this native Celtic culture thrived, totally untouched, until the year 55 BC, when Julius Caesar showed up. Now, Caesar's forces couldn't secure a lasting foothold, but nearly a century later, in 43 AD, Emperor Claudius launched a massive, successful invasion. Just like that, this isolated island was brought under the control of the uncontested superpower of the ancient world.
For the next several centuries, this land was completely transformed into Roman Britannia. The Romans founded major settlements that we obviously still know to today, like London, Chester, and York. They even secured their northernmost frontier by building the massive Hadrian's Wall. And sure, the Romans faced some fierce pushback, most notably the local revolt led by Queen Boudica in 60 AD, but they maintained their iron grip. However, as we know, all empires eventually fall. By 407 AD, the Roman legions abruptly packed up and left to defend their crumbling empire on the continent, leaving behind a massive, gaping power vacuum.
And that sudden Roman departure invited a whole new wave of influence, bringing us to Section 2, Anglo-Saxons and Vikings, new waves of conquest.
And this brilliantly illustrates what happens when a superpower leaves. With the Roman military gone, migrating Germanic tribes, collectively known as the Anglo-Saxons, started settling the eastern parts of the country. Whether it was through violent displacement or gradual integration, they entirely replaced the native Romano-British culture with their own Germanic customs, their pagan beliefs, and their overall way of life. But most importantly, they introduced a Germanic language that would slowly evolve into the very foundation of the English language we're speaking right now. Over time, these Anglo-Saxons formed their own distinct kingdoms, pushing the native Britons out to places like Wales and Cornwall.
But you know, just as the Anglo-Saxons were settling in and converting to Christianity, a terrifying new threat appeared on the horizon. Starting with the famous raid on Lindisfarne in 793, the Vikings arrived. At first, it was just hit-and-run raids, but in 865, they completely changed their strategy to total conquest. A massive force, literally known as the Great Heathen Army, tore through the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. They set up the Danelaw, which was this vast eastern territory ruled entirely by Viking laws. By 878, they had wiped out almost all independent kingdoms. Only the Kingdom of Wessex was left fighting for survival. The future of England was literally hanging by a thread. The Vikings even forced the King of Wessex into hiding, but that king was Alfred, who would very soon be known as Alfred the Great. In 878, Alfred mustered a final stand at the Battle of Edington, miraculously defeating the Vikings and pushing them back. And this sparked just an incredible, generations-long comeback. Alfred's grandson, Athelstan, continued the fight. He successfully conquered the Viking kingdom of York in 927 and became the very first king of the English. In 934, at the Battle of Brunanburh, the English secured their dominance over a unified kingdom, ushering in nearly a century of total supremacy.
But peace in this era? Yeah, that never lasted long. Moving into the new millennium, we arrive at Section 3, 1066 and the Normans, a pivotal turning point.
So what does this all mean when a king dies without an heir? That simple but dangerous question is exactly how the crisis of 1066 started. The Anglo-Saxon king Edward the Confessor passed away in 1042 without leaving a successor. This monumental failure instantly triggered a massive four-way battle for the throne, throwing the entire kingdom's future into absolute chaos.
What followed in 1066 was an exhausting, rapid-fire sequence of invasions that would change the nation forever. In January, an English nobleman named Harold Godwinson took the throne, which sparks huge outrage abroad. In September, King Harold had to rush his army all the way north to defeat a massive Norwegian invasion at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. But just weeks later, his exhausted, battered troops had to march all the way back south to face yet another invasion, this one from Duke William of Normandy. This whole mess culminated in October at the infamous Battle of Hastings, where King Harold was killed, reportedly taking an arrow straight to the eye. And by Christmas Day, Duke William was crowned King of England.
Now, the really crucial point here is how profoundly this conquest altered the nation's DNA. King William commissioned the Doomsday Book to survey his new kingdom, and the results were just staggering. Practically the entire Anglo-Saxon ruling class had been wiped out and replaced by a French-speaking Norman elite. The Anglo-Saxon line of kings was totally extinguished. From this moment on, England's politics, culture, and language were permanently intertwined with France. It completely shifted the entire trajectory of the nation.
And that massive shift drops us right into Section 4, the Middle Ages, plagues and civil war. Under the new Plantagenet kings, England experienced a dizzying mix of expanding empires, catastrophic plagues, and bloody civil wars.
For instance, let's look at the early 13th century. England was facing severe political turmoil and losing immense territory in France. This string of military failures and super heavy taxation just infuriated the powerful English barons. They revolted against King John, ultimately forcing him to sign the Magna Carta in 1215. Now, this was a monumental legal document. It's absolutely crucial because it fundamentally reduced the absolute power of the monarchy for the first time, establishing principles of law that actually continue to shape modern legal systems all over the world today.
But, politics kind of took a backseat to sheer survival pretty soon after. In 1348, a ship arriving from the continent brought the Black Death to England's shores, and the devastation was absolute. Within just 2 years, it's estimated that up to 50%, half of the entire population, was wiped out. Just to put that into perspective, imagine half the people you know just vanishing. This unimaginable loss of life triggered massive socioeconomic changes. With labor incredibly scarce, surviving peasants demanded higher wages, and when the government responded with crushing taxes to fund foreign wars, the tensions boiled over into the violent Peasants' Revolt of 1381, which severely destabilized the country.
And that instability at the bottom of society, it soon mirrored the instability at the top. By 1455, discontent among the feuding nobility sparked a brutal 30-year civil war, known as the Wars of the Roses. It was a vicious, bloody struggle between two branches of the royal dynasty, the House of Lancaster with their red rose and the House of York with their white rose. It was a real Game of Thrones. This finally ended in 1485, when Henry Tudor, the last surviving male of the Lancastrian line, defeated the Yorkist king Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field, uniting the houses and establishing the famous Tudor dynasty. Which sets us up perfectly for Section 5, Tudors and Stuarts, Religious Revolution. This period would be defined by intense religious upheaval and dramatic struggles over absolute power.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how one man's personal desperation completely fractured a nation's identity. King Henry VIII desperately wanted a male heir. When his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, only produced a daughter, Henry asked the Pope for a divorce. The Pope said no way, so Henry took drastic action. He literally split England away from the Catholic Church and established his own Protestant Church of England. His frantic quest for an heir led to a total of 6 marriages and 2 executions, but more importantly, it plunged the country into a brutal century of religious and sectarian violence.
The horrifying human cost of this religious whiplash became crystal clear when Henry's Catholic daughter Mary eventually took the throne. She was absolutely determined to reverse the Protestant Reformation and return England to the Catholic fold. During her relatively short, oppressive reign, she severely persecuted Protestants, burning some 280 people at the stake. This dark period of religious terror earned her the infamous historical nickname Bloody Mary.
And while religious tension simmered, a totally new conflict was boiling over, the battle for political control. By the 1600s, under the Stuart kings, relations between the crown and Parliament completely broke down. King Charles I refused to cooperate with Parliament, and in 1642, the country erupted into the English Civil War. It pitted the Royalists, loyal to the king, against the Roundheads, the parliamentarian forces led by Oliver Cromwell. The Roundheads ultimately won, leading to something truly shocking in 1649. They actually executed King Charles I, temporarily turning England into a republic. The monarchy was eventually restored, but actually, scratch that, the balance of power was permanently broken. When a later Catholic king, James II, began threatening the political establishment again, various factions invited his Protestant daughter Mary and her husband, William of Orange, to replace him. In 1688, William landed with an invasion force, and James's regime just collapsed without a major battle. This glorious revolution led to the 1689 Bill of Rights, which legally recognized the sovereignty of Parliament and severely reduced the power of the monarchy forever. With the political foundation finally stabilized, we are racing toward the modern era in Section 6, Modern Britain, Rise and Fall of Empire. This is where England transitions from a solitary kingdom into a global superpower.
By 1707, the Acts of Union formally merged the English and Scottish parliaments, creating the Kingdom of Great Britain. Under the Hanoverian kings of the 18th century, growing commerce and a totally dominant royal navy transformed Britain into a global maritime power. Then came the 19th century, where the innovations of the Industrial Revolution accelerated the economy and propelled the British Empire to become the largest the world had ever seen. However, nothing lasts forever. The defining conflicts of the 20th century, the First and Second World Wars, ultimately bankrupted the nation. This initiated the end of its global dominance and shifted the world order to what we recognize today.
And this all brings us back to a pretty incredible realization about England's melting pot history. The legacy of these 2,000 years of invasions, plagues, and wars isn't just found in history books. It is literally coming out of my mouth right now. The modern English language is a direct result of Latin from the Romans, Germanic from the Anglo-Saxons, Old Norse from the Vikings, and French from the Normans. Every single violent invasion we covered today is immortalized in the very language you are listening to right now. Doesn't that completely change how you hear every single word? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.